I can take it personally when someone doesn't respond back. And I think that that is the wrong place to go. It is not personal. And I think we need to remind ourselves of that, is if we're reaching out to someone who we know is struggling, who's pulled away, it's not a personal rejection. And so I think consistency and persistency is the key. I'm not going anywhere. I still love you. I miss you. Those words right there, I miss you. I think it is so important to share, hey, you are a meaningful part of my world. And when you are not there, a part of my world is missing. Hi, welcome. My name is Stacy McLaren.
I'm John Beeson.
And this is God in the Gray, a place where we sit down and have conversations about spirituality, culture, and all of the gray areas where we find God together. This is a conversation, and we want to invite you in. We're so glad you joined us, and we hope you enjoy this episode. So I want to talk about loneliness. It is an incredible epidemic. I would say that for any of us who are 40 plus, there you go. It's not the same. Like, we watched the internet start. We all remember the dial-up tones. And since that started, we've watched depression spiral. We've watched loneliness spike. It's an incredibly different new world that we're still trying to figure out how to navigate. And then you add in a pandemic that shut down our entire world and sent more of us to the computers, to isolation. And not just isolation because we were protecting others, but it was a way to hide an insecure being even deeper. And like, it makes my heart hurt just even talking about it. But I think we need to, because I think the church needs to step into that further and help navigate how we help those who are struggling with loneliness. Because we all do. We all have struggled with loneliness at one time or another. So step into that. What do we do with loneliness and the church and culture and society? How do we navigate this?
Yeah, we know for a fact that loneliness is peaking right now. I'm going to pull out a little article here, NPR article on the loneliness epidemics, published in May of 2023. And here's some statistics that are just helpful to consider. It says this: the advisory reported that this was most pronounced in young people aged 15 to 24 who had 70% less social interaction with their friends. You look at the impact, even health-wise, on this that's beginning to be studied. It's massive. You look at, it says this. This is part of that U.S. Surgeon General report. It reports that 29% increased risk of heart disease, 32% increased risk of stroke, 50% increased risk of developing dementia for older adults are connected to loneliness. Here's another one. A 2022 paper from Johns Hopkins University has also found that socially isolated older adults had a higher chance of developing dementia than their peers. Massive, massive impact. And you might be watching this now and you're just like, I'm just there. Like, I'm alone. Like, I don't even know if I can name 3 close friends. Mm-hmm. That's a big deal. It's a big deal. The number of people who say that they're, and when we talk about loneliness, like, this is the danger of a social media age. You know, how many people have hundreds of friends on social media, but don't have a single person who knows that they can bare their soul to? What use are those 100 friends if there's not a single one of them that's a deep connection? There's a faux relationship in that arena that's just dangerous to us. And so the question is for us, how do I make a friend? How do I make a friend in this new world? How do I create relationships that are deep and meaningful, where there's a give and a take, and someone who can come alongside and encourage me and come alongside and exhort me? Like, where does that happen? We see that in all sorts of arenas with all sorts of people who are experiencing this deep loneliness. Where do we find that?
A good question. And I think what you said about social media is such a lie, because we fool ourselves into thinking, look at how many people like me. And that is just such a lie. And it's such a hollow thing. We were made to be connected to one another. We were made for community. There's an author, Jonathan Haidt. He has a book out called The Anxious Generation. Not a believer, but many of the similar statistics in there. And the one thing that he says, even not being a Christ follower, he says we are created for connection. Spiritually, we are beings who need other spiritual beings. That's a statement right there. When someone outside of the church can say, no, we need one another. We have to have that physical human connection, is huge. And I think part of the problem is when you're saying, how do I make a friend, is so many have, again, I'll go to COVID. I think spiked that people found it easier to stay at home, to pull away. Or maybe there's been an experience where you were uncomfortable in person, so you just stepped out of the church. Something made you uncomfortable. You stepped out of the church, or you stepped out of your small group. You stepped out of your people group. And 1 week, 2 weeks, it becomes a habit after a while. And then all of a sudden there is shame because, well, I've been gone for so long. Lies. They've probably forgotten about me. They don't care. They're going to judge me. They think that I'm bad. I'm not as good as, and we create that story in our head. And none of that is true. And that's the thing, is when we're stuck in that loneliness spiral, we don't think anybody can understand. And we don't think that anybody will love us, because somehow that lie has been tucked in there that we're not enough and we are unlovable and nobody would want to be my friend. So I think that question, how do I make a friend? How do I do that? I think you just have to start reaching out. And that's so easy for me to say. It's so easy for me to say. Please hear me when I say that. I know that that is an easy thing. It takes courage when you are in that place where you are lonely and you are desperate for a friend. It takes courage to take just that one step. And as counterproductive as it may seem, I would say, send an email to a pastor that you know. It's an easy first step. And my guess is the response back from that pastor is going to be, let's meet.
Yeah.
And let me say, if you do that and someone says, let's meet, that's a sincere let's meet. It's not I want to meet to judge you. It's I want you back in. I want to help you. Otherwise, we just stay in that struggle spiral, and it just gets, we're not going to get better on our own. We're not going to pull ourselves out of loneliness. It takes others to come alongside of us.
Yeah. One of Haidt's great insights in The Anxious Generation, he's actually made this throughout his work, is that we live in a safety-based culture. Mm. And I would just argue that safety-based culture actually creates in us like a shield toward true and deep friendship, deep relationship. And I mean so on two different levels. One is that safety focus means that alarm bells go off when we're around people who disagree with us, disagree with us about parenting or about politics or about theology or whatever it is. Like it creates in us this fear, well, these can't be my people. This can't be right. And so all of a sudden we're closed off from a whole group because they don't think like us, and that feels unsafe. The second piece of that is that, Haidt talks about the importance of play, of the freedom of play, right? And part of that is that we're made to adventure. We are made to be on mission. And when there is in us this fear of risk, you can't be on mission without risk. And I would argue that the church is intended to be a place where God actually meets us in that place of loneliness with thick community where there's true difference, right? Ethnic difference, age difference, socioeconomic difference, yes, even political difference, right? Where there's true difference and we're set on mission together. We are given a collective purpose. And that actually in those places is the places in which we find the deepest meaning, the deepest community. That actually the deepest friendships are not the friends who it's just this echo chamber where you just agree on everything, where you're just nodding, I can't believe that politician, or I can't believe that parent, or I can't believe, that teacher, or whatever, right? But actually, there's an iron sharpening iron, that we're listening, that we're learning, that we're growing together, and that we're doing something for something bigger than ourselves. Because in a secular world, there is nothing bigger than the self. There's nothing bigger than my emotions and then my safety. And actually, part of the gift of Christianity, part of the gift of the church, is to call us to take that risk beyond ourselves, outside of that safety.
That's great. I think, part of that is just entering into relationship with curiosity, right? If somebody doesn't agree with you or they have a different approach, it's like, wow, you sound very passionate about that. Tell me how you got there. I think if we had more dialogue like that, we would have less friction. Again, it's that iron sharpening iron, but of just, I want to know more. I want to interrogate my own beliefs and reasons why I feel prickly about a certain subject. But I also want to know, how did you get where you're believing this, or and I think that takes the untruth out of shame. It removes shame for sure. And it also removes that idea that no one's going to like me if I believe differently than they do. And we live in a world full of people pleasers, so it's really easy to fall into that. So 2 questions for you. Let's go from a church perspective. A church, big church, let's say Big New Life as a body. How do we step further into helping people navigate through loneliness? And then 2, I'm an individual. I know one of my friends is struggling with loneliness, and it's just an effort to I don't get a response. What do I do? How do I help them? So it's kind of the big idea and then the individual idea. How do we?
Ooh. Let me, you talked about the role of shame. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I don't think, I think there might not be, that's got to be the most significant factor when it comes to loneliness. And if I can get spiritual on you and theological, I firmly believe that there are spiritual forces, that there is the enemy, and there might not be a more favorite tool the enemy has on our own hearts than that tool of shame. Mm-hmm. And I know the spaces in which my heart has been pulled away from community and relationships because of that shame. And I've seen that at play time and time again. So to get to your first question, what does the church need to do? Well, I think we expose that for what it is. We speak honestly about that, and we bring it to the light. We share, hey, listen, does God bring conviction and guilt into my heart when sin comes? Absolutely. That is a mercy of the Spirit of God convicting me. Does God bring shame? No. God does not bring shame. And by that we mean God does not identify us with our sin. God does not look at us and define us and say, hey, you need to cover that up. That's nasty. You're hideous. You need to not be seen, right? That's the work of the enemy, not of God. And so I think it's our role to say, hey, do you feel that? I feel that too. And here's the part that's from God, and here's the part that's from the enemy. And so I think that's part of it. I think the other part, the corporate part, for the church is creating easy paths, clear paths. At New Life, I'm gonna reveal the curtain. If you come to our church, I hope you do. If you come to our church, you're gonna hear 3 times every Sunday us say, "Hey, stop by the First Step table. We want to get to know you." And what we're doing there is we're saying we don't want you to be a number. We don't want you to be a body who filled a seat. We want to start a relationship, and that's going to be us engaging in that. And you're going to get a text, you're going to get an email. We're going to invite you in and invite you on that path. And so that's our responsibility. Of course, we can't drag you there. Like I don't think it's healthy to be in this is just my own take. I don't think the classic, hey, stand up if you're a visitor. I think that's just like compounding that shame component, right? That fear component. So I don't think that's healthy. But I do think like, hey, the church has to create meaningful pathways into relationship. Let me just flip your own question back at you, because I've talked long enough. What does that look like on a one-on-one relationship level? How do we navigate loneliness with those around us?
So I think for me, like I'm speaking to my own heart first, is I can take it personally when someone doesn't respond back. And I think that is the wrong place to go. It is not personal. And I think we need to remind ourselves of that, is if we're reaching out to someone who we know is struggling, who's pulled away, it's not a personal rejection. And so I think consistency and persistency is the key. I'm not going anywhere. I still love you. I miss you. Those words right there. I miss you. We have a friend who's been away, and when I see that friend, I give a hug. I miss you. And I do. It's sincere. I think it is so important to share, hey, you are a meaningful part of my world, and when you are not there, a part of my world is missing. I think when we can express that, and again, persistent, it's not going to stick maybe the first time or the second time or the third time, but just to keep going at it and to not allow that defeat to settle in, because it's not defeat and it's not rejection. God didn't give up on us. Christ didn't give up on us. We keep going, and become that anchor point for them.
And can I reflect something that I've seen in you? You're better at this than me, so I almost feel bad saying this. But like the persistence and the follow through of the actual arriving, mm-hmm. right? And we talk about this a lot in grief, right? Just to show up. Yeah. But I think we need to take that a step further into just life, right? Like there's you see the old acquaintance and they're like, hey, we should get together sometime. That's like worse when it never happens.
Right.
Like, don't say it if you don't mean it. And if you do say it, then do it. You take the responsibility. You say, you follow up, look on the calendar. Hey, next Thursday, could we do coffee? You're so good at that. And I just think that's an invitation for all of us. And I would just even put that on you. If you're the one struggling with loneliness, I know this sounds like backward and like, why should I be the one? Like, be that person for one person. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be caught up and identified with that struggle. You can actually be that person, because here's the reality is there's probably a lot of other people like that too. Yeah. And we just need all of us to just be honest and raise our hands and say, I need somebody else to be that for me. And you can't be that for everybody. But what is that to be that person for one?
I don't remember what movie it is, but there's a line, I think it's We Bought a Zoo or something like that. It's all you need is 30 seconds of massive courage. That's all you need. Just have the courage to reach out. And that goes both ways, on both sides. Just 30 seconds of massive courage, and that breaks that wall. That's all it takes. So.
Can I share? I want to share some of the positive. I shared some negative stats. I'm gonna lift some positive stats here, which are really fun to talk about, like the why of that. Like, what's the impact of stepping out into those relationships? And so let me just share some kind of fun things here. This is Brian Walsh reporting in Time. He says, scientists have found again and again that those with a spiritual practice or who follow religious beliefs tend to be happier than those who don't. Study after study has found that religious people tend to be less depressed, less anxious than non-believers, better able to handle the vicissitudes of life than non-believers. This is Harold Koenig, who's a professor of psychiatry at Duke University School of Medicine. Here's what he concludes. A large volume of research shows that people who are more religious and spiritual have a better mental health and adapt more quickly to health problems compared to those who are less religious and spiritual. Some of the positive effects of religiosity include coping with adversity, hope, optimism, self-esteem, depression, suicidal tendencies, anxiety, and psychotic disorders. Pretty cool.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Again, we are spiritual creatures who have been created for each other, for in-person, one-on-one group connection. This has been a great conversation. We can do so much to help so many, but again, like you said, be the one for one. And that's a call to all of us, right? We thank you so much for joining us for this episode. We will drop all of the resources that we spoke about in the show notes. I encourage you to hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss any episodes to come. Once again, this is a conversation. We would love to hear your thoughts and your questions. You can drop them in the comments below. We are glad you joined us, and we can't wait to see you again.